Welcome back to the Paranormal Inc. Ohio podcast. I'm your host, Ed, and tonight we're diving into one of the internet's most disturbing urban legends ever created, the Russian sleep experiment. Whether you've heard this story before or you're experiencing it for the first time, I can almost guarantee it will leave you questioning what people are capable of and whether there's any truth hiding behind the fiction. Before we begin, I want to make one thing clear. The Russian sleep experiment is considered an urban legend, also known as a creepypasta. There is no credible historical evidence that this experiment ever happened, but like all great legends, it feels just believable enough to make you wonder. So dim the lights, lock the doors, and let's step into one of the darkest tales the internet has ever produced. The story supposedly begins shortly after World War II. According to the legend, Soviet researchers had developed a powerful experimental stimulant, gas. The gas was said to eliminate the human need for sleep while keeping subjects mentally alert. To test the chemical, 5 political prisoners were selected. The prisoners were promised freedom if they could remain awake for 30 straight days inside a sealed chamber. The chamber was stocked with food, books, water, and enough supplies to survive the entire experiment. Hidden microphones and thick observation windows allowed researchers to monitor every move. The heavy steel doors were locked. The experiment began. For the first several days, everything appeared normal. The prisoners talked among themselves, read books, shared stories, played cards. The researchers noted only minor stress from sleep deprivation. By day 5, the conversations became quieter. The prisoners started showing signs of paranoia. They stopped trusting each other. They whispered into the microphones, accusing one another of crimes they may or may not have committed. Researchers believed this was simply the beginning of psychological breakdown caused by lack of sleep. But then things became much stranger. By the 9th day, one prisoner suddenly began screaming. According to the legend, he screamed continuously for nearly 3 hours. His voice eventually became so strained that his vocal cords were damaged. When he could no longer scream, the chamber fell silent, and another prisoner began screaming. Soon after, the remaining prisoners tore pages from the books, covered them with their own bloody fluids, and pasted them over the observation windows. The researchers could no longer see inside. Even more disturbing, the microphones went almost completely silent. No talking, no movement, nothing. For days, the chambers remained silent. The researchers feared the equipment had failed, or worse, that every prisoner had died. No one knew what waited behind those sealed steel doors, and that's where the legend truly begins. The chamber doors. After nearly 2 weeks without communication, the researchers decided they had no choice but to enter the chamber before opening the doors. They announced over the intercom that they were coming inside. They expected relief. Instead, one voice answered calm, weak, almost pleading. The voice reportedly said, "We no longer want to be freed." The researchers were confused. Military personnel were called in to assist. When the doors finally opened, they discovered a scene so horrifying that it would become the most famous part of the entire legend. Food supplies remained untouched. Blood covered the floors. Pieces of flesh were scattered throughout the room. One prisoner was dead. The others were still alive, but barely. According to the story, the surviving prisoners had mutilated themselves. They had torn away portions of their own skin, exposed muscle, damaged organs, yet somehow they continued moving. Continued breathing. Medical personnel couldn't understand how anyone could survive injuries that severe. Even stranger, the prisoners seemed completely unaffected by pain. You're going to hear my dog. He likes to bark and talk back. Attempts to remove them from the chamber, some fought with impossible strength. Others begged to stay inside. They demanded more of the experimental gas. One reportedly shouted, "I must remain awake." As soldiers attempted to restrain them, one prisoner supposedly laughed while suffering injuries that should have been fatal. Another died instantly after the gas supply was interrupted. Researchers became convinced that the stimulant gas was somehow keeping them alive. The surviving subjects became increasingly violent. Several guards were seriously injured. One supposedly had his throat ripped open. Another suffered catastrophic injuries while trying to control the prisoners. Whether believable or not, this is the moment where the Russian sleep experiment transformed from a psychological horror story into something almost supernatural. The prisoners no longer seemed human. They weren't acting like exhausted people. They were acting like something that had evolved beyond sleep, beyond pain, beyond fear itself. The final interviews. The surviving prisoners were eventually restrained. Doctors attempted surgery. According to the legend, anesthesia barely affected them. One subject reportedly laughed throughout the surgery. Another begged doctors to not let him fall asleep. Researchers became obsessed with understanding why. They questioned the remaining prisoners. Their answers were chilling. When asked what they were, one supposedly replied, "We are what you hide from yourselves every night." That single sentence became one of the most quoted lines in internet horror history. The researchers debated ending the experiment. Some believed the prisoners had suffered irreversible psychological damage. Others believed the gas had unlocked something hidden inside the human mind. Against medical advice, the lead scientists decided to restart the experiment. The remaining prisoners eagerly agreed. They begged for more gas, more isolation, more wakefulness. As preparations were made, one researcher finally snapped, unable to witness the horror any longer. He grabbed a weapon, he shot the lead scientist, and turned toward the last surviving prisoner. He demanded to know, "What are you?" The prisoner's answer became the most unforgettable ending of the legend. According to the story, the creature smiled, quietly replied, "Have you forgotten so easily? We are you. We are the madness that lurks within all of you, suppressed every night by sleep." The researcher fired one final shot. Silence filled the chamber. The experiment was over, or so the story claims. Fact or fiction? So did the Russian sleep experiment really happen? The answer is no. There are no Soviet documents, no scientific records, no military reports, no names of researchers, no evidence whatsoever that this experiment ever took place. But we all know that the Soviets liked to hide everything from the outside world until they deemed it necessary and ready to let everyone know. The story first appeared online in 2010 during a horror writing competition on the website Creepypasta. Its anonymous author crafted the story so realistically that many readers believed it was genuine. Photographs often shared with the story are not real evidence either. Most are movie makeup effects, haunted attraction actors, edited artwork, or unrelated medical photographs taken completely out of context. Despite being fictional, the story spread across YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, Facebook, and paranormal websites. Millions of people still debate whether some version of the experiment could have happened in secret. While governments have certainly conducted unethical human experiments throughout history, there is absolutely no evidence connecting any real event to the Russian sleep experiment. Its power comes from how believable it feels. Sleep deprivation itself is terrifying. Real studies show prolonged sleep loss can cause hallucinations, paranoia, memory loss, confusion, emotional instability, and eventually severe physical decline. The legend simply exaggerates those real effects into pure horror. That's why it has remained one of the most famous internet urban legends ever written. It reminds us that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't ghosts or demons, but the darkness inside the human mind. Whether you believe it's simply an internet story or enjoy imagining there might be a hidden grain of truth, the Russian sleep experiment has earned its place among the greatest urban legends ever created. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Paranormal Inc. Ohio podcast. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to follow the show on all your favorite podcast formats. Wow, I can't talk. Leave a review and share it with someone who loves paranormal stories, urban legends, and unexplained mysteries just like you and I. Till next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that sound just believable enough to be true. My own thoughts on the Russian sleep experiment is I believe it happened. I don't believe the pictures you see are from the Russian sleep experiment. I believe that they did experiment, because back during World War II, most sides experimented with some type of drug. Something to make the soldiers be more effective in war. The Germans used something that was almost close to methamphetamines. The Americans were tested on with PCP. I mean, it's all speculation. That's what we've heard. Is it true or not? Nobody knows. But it can't be a coincidence that most of these nations were actually using experimental drugs to try to heighten their soldiers. It just, back then they didn't know what it was, and it just made tactical sense. So do I believe that the Russians or the Soviets, came up with something that was like that to stimulate, to keep their soldiers awake? Yes, I do. And the Russian sleep experiment, I think, was very real. But I love each and every single one of you so much. Thank you for coming out and checking out tonight's episode. I hope you guys liked it. And I know it's a short one today, and I know my dog Roger has been barking and barking and barking. That's just what he does. But thank you so much for checking it out. And you guys will hear me on the next one. Thanks. Hope everyone has a great day. Bye, everyone.